Great. Why don't we begin? Thank you all for bearing with us, and good afternoon to the Applied Energy Technology panel with a focus on the electric sector. I'm Shahir Usam, partner with Atlin, an American energy consultancy, and I'm glad to have a wonderful panel of experts to share some insights with you this afternoon. We'll bring a broad range of perspectives from policy, financing, R&D, generation, and of course, from the ministry. And just one caveat and note of explanation, we're going to touch on AI. AI is a bit of an umbrella term, and our experts will really help sort of dissect that, but it's really going to cover everything: grid simulations, digital twins, machine learning for load and weather forecasting, and maybe even they'll try to touch a bit on ChatGPT. The format for the discussion will be, first we'll have a round of one-on-one questions, and then some group questions, and if there's time with the audience, a few audience questions. We started, I guess, 10 minutes late, so we'll try and adhere to that, but we'll see how it goes. So first I'd like to introduce Mr. Roman Andarak, the Deputy Minister in Energy and a lead for digital transformation. We're honored to have him with us. Next, Dr. Enrique Kremers, Senior Researcher at IABG. Thank you. Magdalena Lipovska, Chair of the Board of Bloom Consulting. Brian Plourde, CEO of Lima Technologies. And Dr. Antonio De Paula, Scientific Project Officer with the EU Joint Research Center. So glad to have you all. We'll start off with Roman. Thank you for joining. And just to set the stage for everyone, you know, in your mind, what are the priorities on the digital transformation side for the electric sector? And more broadly, what are you thinking of in terms of new energy sector technologies?
Well, thank you very much. First priority, I would say, given the state of the sector, Ukraine now is #1 country in Europe, if not in the world, in terms of suffering from cyber attacks, daily cyber attacks, and this incredible resilience that we see from the energy companies is remarkable, because so far, so year of war, daily hundreds of thousands of attempts, the sector withstands, and this is mainly due to preparation, but also for assistance from our partners. Currently, workers of the energy sector undergo training. 6,000 workers with the support of USAID are going through training on cybersecurity, how to keep the system resilient. But this is for the moment, and this is what we are, I must say, that we are doing quite well. What we are thinking about the future. About the future, we are deploying a lot of distributed generation. We are modernizing grids, we are repairing grids. And here, where we see potential for the future, how we could use artificial intelligence to actually help us survive, how to develop resilient grid, flexible grid, smart grid. And here, I think that AI offers the solution, the key to the problem, given the scarcity of resources and the level of damages. So we are talking about smart grid optimization. We are talking about predictable maintenance and search for potential failures in the system. This is what our operator, Ukrenergo, is already doing. We are talking about consumption management. We are talking about renewable energy integration. We are talking about, given the scale of deployment of renewable energy sources, we are looking into energy storage optimization and renewable energy sources. Then ministry is actively engage into market integration with the European Union, and we think that here artificial intelligence could develop algorithms how to play on the market to give price signals, given even weather forecasts for potential traders. So I already mentioned grid security, cyber protection, demand response, carbon emission reduction, and of course management of popular electric vehicle systems. Those are mentioned, just for you who did count, just 10 aspects of how artificial intelligence is used. But for us, and I think that we are living this AI revolution for the moment. And those directions or fields that could be used by AI are really limitless, and we probably don't know even how it could be used. I encourage everyone to enter ChatGPT and ask what the AI could be used for in energy or in another field. I believe you will be enlightened. That's why I'm really grateful for inviting me to this panel, and I will be very glad to listen to my colleagues here on the panel. How do they use, how do they apply it in their daily work so I could transform and bring it back home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I remember one of our earlier conversations, you mentioned aggregated load curtailment. I mean, certainly to meet peak reliability needs or ancillary services, you're going to need some sophisticated tools to do some of the load forecasting, grid management. One thing you mentioned on the cybersecurity need and distributed energy resources. And I remember in an earlier presentation that Dr. Kremers had given for the NATO Nordic Pine exercise, you touched extensively on DERs and the resilience aspect, but also some of the challenges. And maybe you can sort of go into that in a bit more depth for the audience here.
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me to the panel and to the organizers. Decentralization, we have discussed about that already sufficiently. I think we all know that PV and wind make the energy system more robust in a distributed way. And today the shares of renewables are still small, but they are growing exponentially. So if we look at the plans of PV that we are deploying, for example, I come from Germany, so I know that figures quite well. We plan to have 500 gigawatt of PV in 2040, which is quite a lot. It's more than 10 times what we had a few years ago. So this is really growing rapidly and growing exponentially. And to integrate these big shares of renewables, we need any kind of compensation of the volatility. So we need flexibility, and the flexibility can be provided in three ways. So rather you use conventional systems as backup, you use gas plants or hydropower that you have in Ukraine, as we have seen, or we can use battery energy storage, or we can use demand response. But ultimately, when we see how PV and how wind will be growing, we will need all sources of flexibility to compensate this if we want to have a sustainable energy system. So actually, to coordinate these sources of flexibility, we need energy management and intelligent energy management. So today we can see actually two trends, which is the decentralization of the structure. So we go from big power plants to small and very distributed and high number power plants. But on the other side, we see something that is the centralization of intelligence. So we have all these small power plants and they have to be coordinated somehow. So all of them need to be communicating with each other or communicating with a central. And the trend that we see is that information and intelligence is rather centralizing. So this is bringing two risks with it. It's of course causing a risk because I have a decentralized structured system, but I have a centralized intelligence, which makes the system again vulnerable. If I can attack a central hub, even if it's not a physical hub, it's a virtual hub, it's a server farm, or it's a control room where all these assets are managed, I make the system the same way vulnerable as the classic system. So this is something we have to take care. And we need more and more communication, and this communication makes the system vulnerable as well. So the communication channels need to be securized in a proper way to make the system work. And the second risk is that we put into dependency the energy system of the ICT system. So we have a circular dependency, a two-way dependency, because communication is not working without energy, and energy should not rely completely on ICT, on internet, on communication to work. So we need to be able to have a system that is also working without a 24/7 internet connection. So that's an important point. And the dispersed devices that are entering, so nowadays everything is connected to the internet. You have an app for everything. So of course the inverters, the batteries we see also have apps. And these apps need to be secured in a special way because they are part of critical infrastructure. They are not just a TV or they are not just a cell phone, but they are part of critical infrastructure. And even with the current EU securitization laws like NIS2 and so on, they are not sufficiently covered for the long-term future. So that's something we have to think about it. So we have to deal with these resilience questions quite well, and especially when we talk about AI, we need to integrate this into the energy management, and these energy management systems need to be decentralized, need to be on the edge to avoid and to reduce the needs of communication, so to be as resilient as the distributed assets are in the same way. So we need to have local solutions, we need to have fallback solutions so that we are able to black start, that we are able to have an islanding mode, that we can have grid forming capabilities. And the grid needs to be in the future in a form of a sort of cellular structure. So it needs to be working both locally, but also in an interconnected, almost like an organism, an organic way that is actually the stable and economically viable way to operate the system in an interconnected way. So this is why we need to introduce resilience by design in the systems, and we need to introduce this resilience now and not in 20 years when their system is already running. So that's quite important. And for that, just to finish my contribution, we need proper tools, simulation models, digital twins that help us to design the system from the beginning and create scenarios and test all these things that we're seeing in Ukraine, also virtually for other territories, so to really be sure that our system can be resilient and can be robust towards any kind of perturbations.
Thank you, Enrique. And so it sounds like there's obviously an embedded resilience when you distribute the resources, but as it's a larger part of the energy mix, it becomes fundamentally critical infrastructure. If it's 1% of the energy mix, you know, if you lose it, you're okay. If it's 20% or higher in particular regions, it's pretty fundamental. So thank you. So for this panel, we promised pragmatic approaches. You know, speculation and risk-taking are important, but in this scenario, we really want to offer the best. And nothing matters that level unless you can finance it and operate it successfully. And Magda has some of the most experience I know of in the region with BESS financing. So we'd love to hear your take over the years with battery and other asset financing.
Hello everyone, dzień dobry Państwu. Maybe just to give you a little bit of background. So for the past 5 years, I was very much focusing on financing and development of renewables here in Poland. My main focus was on large-scale, utility-scale energy storage facilities and also solar farms. So from my perspective, I truly believe that energy storage could have a transformational impact on Ukraine. We should consider here several factors. The first one, and I suppose the most obvious one, is the reconstruction of the energy system, which will be a tremendous task on the Ukrainian side to be done in the following years. But not only reconstruction, but also modernizing it. So modernizing the grid, digitalizing it. And from this perspective, where energy storage could definitely help, it can help with stabilizing the grid. So as one of my colleagues mentioned that before, but ancillary services could play a very important role. So frequency balancing, voltage support, and things like that. Also, from what I know from the media, and of course Mr. Andarek can correct me if I'm making the numbers not right, but Ukraine has very ambitious goals and it's not stopping with renewables development. So I've heard that the goal is to deploy something around 10 gigawatts of power by 2030, which is a very, very rapid growth in a very short period of time. And this is where energy storage can help also to manage variability of renewables, especially when we've got wind or solar farms involved. It can be crucial, absolutely, to sustain such a big growth. Another factor that could be considered also that could support energy storage development in the country is the European Union accession process. So it depends, of course, it depends if Ukraine will decide to join the European Union, but if it will, energy storage is a topic widely discussed on the European Union Forum. And of course, Ukraine will have to comply with certain policies and regulations, and developing energy storage in the country could be very helpful in terms of that. And I suppose last but not least, the market conditions are finally favorable to deploy energy storage projects. You know, when we were talking to my colleagues from other commercial companies not long time ago, like 4 years ago, and we were creating a business case and a business model for energy storage standalone facility, it wasn't financially viable. And it was not, you know, a long time ago from now. What has changed? Definitely CapEx cost went dramatically down. So CapEx went down 2-3 times in the last 2 or 3 years, and it will keep going down. Also, the payback period for energy storage right now, of course, depending on the location, specific revenue streams and conditions, but it's something around between 2 and 7 years for standalone energy storage, which is very good. So I suppose the conclusion would be I'm a big fan and a big supporter of energy storage, as you can see, and I truly think it could play a key role in recovery of the country in the following years.
Thank you. You know, so we've covered storage, we've covered distributed energy generation. Storage is a bridge either way to bring utility scale renewables to the market, and this is a fundamental part of the long-term vision. Utility scale, solar, wind, gas. And Antonio, you bring a unique perspective as a researcher at the EU JRC, looking at this from a broad perspective, whether grid simulations for system planning, digital twins elsewhere within the JRC. Maybe you can offer some comments from that end.
Yeah, I mean, there are many points that already have been mentioned, but since we're talking about artificial intelligence applied to the energy system, I would like to frame these points using two starting points. One is, what are the questions? And the questions are coming from the ongoing decarbonization of the energy system for reasons that we all know. That means rapid penetration of renewables, but also electrification of transportation and heating. As a result, we are seeing increasing levels of uncertainty and variability in the energy system that we need to deal with. And these are the questions, the main questions at least. And then we also have part of the answer that comes from the second big thing happening right now in the energy system, which is digitalization. We're seeing, I saw earlier that smart meters were mentioned. We are looking at improved sensoring capabilities at all levels of the network, smart appliances. So at the moment, we are producing a huge amount of data, and something that works very well with large amount of data is artificial intelligence. So one key objective is to leverage this amount of data, use AI techniques to answer those two big questions. How do we deal with uncertainty and variability and keep the system efficient, safe, and reliable? I can give you some examples. I think one of the main topics where AI can be effective is, well, first of all, it can be used to unlock the flexibility in the system. We were talking about storage earlier. Storage is a very significant source of flexibility. If managed properly, it can help us, for example, balance demand and supply, but that's complex. There are a lot of uncertainties. AI can help in that regard, can help us, they can suggest us what's the best, most efficient way to use storage to run an efficient system. Another thing that was mentioned earlier was predictive maintenance. There are many cases throughout Europe where just relying on, voltage, current readings, we are able to predict when a component is going to fail. We can replace it earlier and do it in a much cheaper way. And the third point that I want to make is forecast. Forecast in particular of load and renewable generation, because it directly tackles that point of uncertainty and variability that I was mentioning earlier. The last generation of neural network can help us significantly in that regard. And this is something that at the JRC we're doing ourselves. We're trying to produce better models for the forecast of photovoltaic generation and for the load profile of residential, commercial, and industrial uses. And one thing that we are focusing on and that I would like to also mention here is somehow the attempt to bridge the gap between AI, which is from a technical perspective very complex, very big models, difficult to train, difficult to set up, and then the final uses of these AI models. We want the AI to be accessible to the general public, to private users, small, medium enterprises, small towns. That's what we are trying to do. We are trying to translate artificial models into web-based, free-to-access platform. One example in this regard is, for example, renewable energy communities, a new tool put forward by the European Commission to promote energy transition at a local level. We provide an AI-powered instrument that allows, for example, small towns that want to create their own community to go online, put their parameters there, and check how well their potential community is going to perform in terms of energy sharing, energy efficiency, and energy costs. Let me conclude maybe with some points about what we need to be careful about. Again, some points have already been mentioned. Cybersecurity is a big thing, especially because we don't know how this AI model works in every small detail. Since we're talking also about large amount of data, security and privacy of the data is of paramount importance. And third and last point is data center. We need to be aware that AI is an energy-intensive tool. Data centers are becoming more and more a non-negligible part of our energy consumption. So let's just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. And I agree. I like the sort of the broader educational aspects of this mission. Of course, this is essential if we achieve what I hope, which is broad residential energy projects, which we already see in some markets. I think, Enrique, you once mentioned Germany. I want to turn to Brian now. You're a technology vendor who's worked in some complex settings, and I'm sure you're going to have some interesting perspectives on getting assets built and operating them in these settings.
Yeah, thank you. Brian Plerd, company from Lima. And we're a US-based company, and we do research with the US Department of Defense. And part of our work specializes on deployable, sustainable microgrids for powering critical infrastructure, primarily in remote areas such as surveillance equipment, comm sites, field hospitals, things that you can't afford to lose power. And where we find from newer technologies is how do you have interoperability with the existing microgrids and generators? You have a lot of these remote power assets, and typically a generator's size for a peak power load or a peak power demand, and you find that when they're operated under normal conditions that they're running at lower than average RPM, which really reduces your efficiency and lifespan of your generator. So we find that when we integrate deployable solar with storage into these smart microgrids, you're really reducing fuel, reducing logistics chains, increasing reliability. Some of the technologies that we find, especially in the defense space, is designs that are practical that allow for quick deployment, quick training, local capacity building. That really builds into your reliability, especially when you have to move equipment or your equipment needs to be maintained all the time. One of the things that we've found in our ecosystem is there's a tactical microgrid standard that makes everybody have interoperability where there's a common COM port data communication between the different microgrid and the different loads. So the controller, no matter what type of power system you have, you can always swap them in and out. And then touching on the topic of AI, one of the newer tools that we see, especially in extreme weather, and this was just a recently released AI package, is GraphCast. And that's an AI-based weather forecasting tool that's really quick. And my personal background's in numerical simulation, physics-based numerical modeling, and AI tools allow for faster response of data sets. They may not be 100% accurate, as we know, and we don't necessarily understand the complexity of some of these AI tools, but they do allow you to have a predictive tool that allows you to have a faster response for reliability. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian, and I'm glad you touched on a physics-based model versus a machine learning-based model. And just in my experience, I've seen short-term forecasting. The ML tools can be quite effective on price or load, and of course, long-term physics-based models are essential, right? I mean, how are you going to model, from a system planning perspective, a transmission line that is unimagined before that wouldn't even show up in any sort of data sets? And there's one case I heard, a short-term generation forecasting missed a solar eclipse, of course, because there's no astronomical aspect for that region, at one point over the last year. So I want to turn to a couple of group questions and let the audience prepare any questions if they have them. I think the first one is, just given the broad backgrounds of our panelists, if there's any particular technology trends that you think are quite relevant and compelling for the reconstruction era within Ukraine. We touched on in the beginning aggregated load, for example, but is there anything else that you recommend? And on the flip side, if there's something that you think is overhyped, because that's one of the benefits as experts you can bring that doesn't necessarily make sense at this moment, let's say in the 5 to 10 year planning horizon.
Well, for me, it's very difficult to choose whatever of those applications has most priority or least priority, because all of them are equally important. Starting from cybersecurity, aggregated load, demand management, demand response, integration of renewables, batteries. I'm happy that we are more or less on the same line. We all understand that the benefits that we can get. My question back to my colleagues would be to explore situations when AI and those technologies compete with each other. Because if we have 1,000 AI models working on the same market, what would be the result, and how AI would reply to decisions by another AI model? This is something that I haven't seen yet response to.
That's great. We can touch on it even later. Maybe you're mentioning like a power grid orchestration model, which are under development and I think will eventually be implemented. Any other comments from the panelists on the relevant technology trends in this scenario? Brian? Yeah, good.
Yeah, I can touch base on storage, and I think any one type of battery chemistry seems overrated. There always seems to be a moving trend, and I know from our space on the US DoD research aspect is they don't ever focus us on one type of chemistry. They focus on, hey, you need to fit this form factor and assume that the technology is going to continue to evolve and change, especially as more science comes out there and batteries get better and better.
Thank you. Enrique?
Yeah, maybe just to add, we talked already about energy management, which I think is quite important for this deployment. And in that context, for energy management to work, we have to couple many different technologies. So the technology that's needed for that is also interoperability as such. So standards that in the military world start to develop, but in the civil world, which is very dispersed, very heterogeneous, because we have so many different technologies, they all have to work together in an orchestrated way, as you said. So that's quite an important aspect, I think. Yeah.
I just want to do a time check. I'll borrow we're I guess 10 minutes behind net. I'll borrow at least 5 minutes. Ask one more closing question for the group and see if there's any audience questions. And so just to summarize, I mean, we've gone through some concrete recommendations. I mean, I think there's agreement in distributed generation as a need in the region and really understanding what AI means in a concrete fashion and really understanding the valuable applications. Do you, for the audience, for the panelists, do you have any more recommendations maybe on the financing side, what's relevant in the years ahead?
Sure. So from the financing perspective, before you have a project, you have to convince your investors, bankers, financiers, and other stakeholders that the project is viable. So planning of the implementation of machine learning algorithms or AI, if you will, from the very beginning is very important, because how you will measure and how you will report the impact afterwards. So I truly believe it's very important to think about those technologies already on the planning stage. Also, the investors are asking, okay, but how you will mitigate risks? What data will be provided, you know, on an ongoing basis. So this is, I truly believe this is very important to even get the project financed.
I mean, one concept is the data, is the model bankable? Is it financeable, right? When you're really looking at it, look at the power price curves, for example. Do we have any other specific policy recommendations from the panelists? Please.
Maybe not policy, but related to the investment point. I would like to point out the activity that we conduct as Science for Policy in the technological analysis of smart grid technologies. We, as GRC, we produce large amount of science-based technical report regarding the technology maturity, the competitiveness, supply value chain of several energy-related technologies, from storage to solar to photovoltaic. That's something that's free, available online, updated every year. So maybe that's something that might be of interest for the audience.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to check quickly if there's any audience questions. There's one there, please. We can hear him. So what do we need for energy storage to scale? What innovations?
Pretty much, yeah,
Tech
from
to
a
market.
business perspective, yeah.
Please go for it, Magda or whomever else.
I'm going to say two things. First one is education about energy storage model, business model, and what are the revenue streams, explaining to the market that we've got ancillary services, that we've got capacity market, that we've got price arbitrage as a revenue stream. And also the second thing that needs to happen, we need to have grid connection conditions for the projects. So there is a massive problem in the country, in Poland. We've got 98% rejection rate at the moment. So the grid modernization needs to follow for those projects to appear and to be built. But despite that, everything is there. So the technology is there. The CapEx prices are there. The interested investors are there. So I truly believe it will grow rapidly in the following years. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Seeing none, I think all questions have been answered. We'll have a pop quiz at the end. Stick around. But I really appreciate the insights from the panel, the wide range. We'll do our best Roman to help, please reach out to any of us. Thank you again, and thank you to the audience for their kind attention. Thanks.